This happened many years ago, when I was just only 15 years old back in 1995. I only had told this story to only a few close friends and family. Some of them didn't even believe me about this story, but it's all true. And I'm decided to tell you all everyone online for the very first time what happened the summer of 1995 in my home small hometown in the Midwest. But I won't give exact location because I want to be keeping this for as much privacy as possible. But anyways, throughout my childhood, I had been watching a lot of scary movies about cults or other stuff like that. And honestly, I never even imagined there was such things as cults in my hometown. Because my hometown was just a small, middle of nowhere. We didn't have much that things happening in our hometown. It only had like a small gas station, a convenience store, and just a post office and a small dollar store. But this small town probably had probably almost 3,000 people at a time. And I was very bored with this particular summer. And since most of my friends were either out of town, were on vacation, spend time with relatives, and since both my parents was at work at the time, I was home alone at all the time. I did have an older brother, but he spent all the time with his friends. So I didn't do it much else. Either played some of my own toys or just watch some TV. But this particular day, I didn't know what to do. I mean, there was nothing else to watch on the TV, and I basically had been watching all the movies that we had multiple times already. And since there were no other kids in the neighborhood that was around my age, some were just much younger, some could have been around my brother's age, but they were not interested to spend time with a 15-year-old girl. So, and since we lived in a small town and near outskirts of the suburbs, and since we have this very dense woods behind our backyard, and so I thought, why not? I often had been exploring the woods, but this time I decided to do a bit more deeper exploring. So I packed a backpack with some snacks and a flashlight if I would be out there for the whole day. And I had even left a note to my parents that I would be out for a couple of hours to do some exploring in the woods. My parents already knew that I had done some exploring in the past years, and they only told me just being completely safe and aware of what I've been going. And always bring me some first aid kit just in case if something would happen, which I did. I even brought my pocket knife, just in case. Even though these woods were quite big, they were at least about several miles in different directions. There were usually only deers, foxes, maybe wild boars, but nothing much as big animals like wolves or bears. But in the past, there have been some reports of someone been seeing a lone wolf or two, but nothing as much as serious. But anyways, back to the story. When I was exploring it in the woods, while I was just first exploring some of the areas that I have been explored in the past few months or past few years, and nothing had changed. Of course, I did see a lot of different animals like rabbits, raccoons, even a deer or two. But I decided to walk the limit of the ones as far as I have been going before. When I would reach that limit, I was curious to see what could be beyond the next tree lines in the distance. And as I was walking to myself, I was just singing or just talking to myself, listening to the birds singing. After maybe, I think it were at least a 3 hours walk. And I think that was probably like 3 p.m. and it was still in early afternoon of during the middle of summer. So I sat down and brought some, took some of the snacks and with me to eat and relax my feet a little bit. But as I was sitting there, I heard nothing. Because at the time when before I sat down, I only heard a lot of birds and even small critters walking around in the woods. But suddenly, as soon as I sat down and started to eat, it went quite, it went quite deadly silent. I was a bit unnerved because this is the first time I had ever been experienced this type of silence before in the woods. But though it could also be that I had never been this far in the woods before. Maybe there was this in some areas that the woods usually went quietly. So I brushed it off and just continued eating my snacks. And after a while, I decided to just continue walking in the same direction as I was heading to, even though I wasn't having any particular directions. And like having a map, walking in this middle of this dense forest, it was unlike anything that even exists. I wonder if I would bring some of my friends or even my older brother here next time in these deep woods. Because I had even had to ask my friends or my brother if they had ever been this, if they had been or ever been in a deeper parts of the woods. Because according to rumors, it has supposed to be an old abandoned cabin somewhere in the woods. Well, alleged to be to exist. But my brother said that story is just that, a story. He had actually been a little bit farther deep in different parts of the woods, but never found any such place to be supposed to be the place of this old cabin being located. In this old cabin, well, there was nothing much supernatural or paranormal about it. There was nothing a home to such serial killer or anything. It's supposed to be an old abandoned camp, a cabin that was built in the late 1800s and early 1900s. There were supposed to be a lumberjack who lived there. And one day he just didn't want to live there anymore and he just moved. And there was nothing like scary stories like I mentioned. But people have been trying to find this cabin for years apparently, but never found it. But it is, as my brother said, if this cabin did exist, it's possible it has been run away over time since it has been alleged over 100 years ago. So it's possible if there's something remains, it's probably only the stone foundation. But over time, even that could have been covered in moss, leaves, and even tree branches. So it is possible, even if that was all that remains, it's only had to be very careful to look where to be looking for. But I wasn't even looking for this cabin this time. I just wanted to do some decent exploration of the forest. Even though my dad had actually been giving me and my brother this survival skills, technique, training, if we would end up being lost in the woods, we would always have to try to figure out what to do next, like to build a makeshift shelter and always being able to start a fire just in case it would happen. But at least my dad gave me that, otherwise I have no idea if I would, even if it would end up lost in the woods, I don't know. But anyways, as I was walking and walking, and as far as I could see, dense woods everywhere. But suddenly, and I was walking, I could see this strange opening. I didn't expect it was a small opening, so I thought maybe it could have been a road passing through these woods, or maybe a river or something. But I was getting closer, I discovered it was a small clearing. There was probably like the half a size of a football field in that small clearing. I was a little bit surprised because there was nothing else there. No trees at all. It's like it's if someone had by intentionally on purpose cut down the trees, but there were no signs of any remains of trees. There were nothing. It's like an open field. I was very surprised, but I did decide why not to do some exploring in this particular small clearing, just in case if, well, something would happen. And, well, there was this clearing, there was nothing much important. There nothing much significant about it. It's just a small clearing. So I crossed the field and went continue to the next side of the woods. And I went on there for maybe another couple of hours until I decided to take another break. But as I was sitting down on this big rock, I did notice that the sky had already been getting darker a bit around it. Had been around almost 6 p.m. But as I decided, well, maybe it's time for me to go back home. Then I heard a strange sound. Not an animal. The sound like almost singing. I went closer and closer to the sound where it's coming from. At first, I didn't know if it's coming from my left, my right, or even in front of me, or even from behind me. So I continued walking, and as I was getting closer, I saw this light from a fire. Not like a campfire, but almost like a small bonfire or something. I heard people were actually singing or at least talking. I actually did notice there were people. People in robes. I was like, maybe this is some sort of Christian meeting in the woods. Sometimes people can make meetings in the places like this. But I was getting closer as the hide behind some big boulders or in just to be in case. And these people weren't as I suspected at first to be just people doing maybe a camping trip. But it wasn't. After all those memories of this horror movies that I've seen with my parents and my brother about cults, it hit me. I had encountered my own very first real life cult, and I was like, what should I even do? And I was so terrified. But I was sitting there behind the boulders and listening. They were just singing and talking about the sacrifice of their god. But apparently, they were devil worshippers. I was like terrified. And I knew that if they ever saw me or even found me, I would have been goner for sure. But they were just talking and then suddenly start singing, and they even made a sacrifice of a chicken in a fire. And they were screaming and singing, and I had enough. So as I was about to walk, I managed to turn around and walk slowly backwards, and I was like, hope I don't branch hit something and just make a snap. And as I jinxed it, it happened. I walked on this branch and it snapped. And I was afraid that these people would actually hear me. And as I slowly turned around, and I was went pale because they also heard it and they saw me. At first, they didn't say anything. I was standing there almost frozen. But then apparently, at least one of them said, "Grab her." They could see it was I was a girl, and apparently several of those people turn around again, and but this time all of them start running after me. I was in panic. What can I even do other than just run, run, and run? But I wasn't even know exactly where to go because at the time it was probably like 6:30 or maybe it's close to 7 p.m. It was dark outside by now at this point, and being in a deep woods at that time frame, it's pretty much dark. And I did have a flashlight, but I didn't even dare to use it because it would give out my position to those follow me. I could actually still hear them running fast after me, deep, deep in the woods, screaming that they were going to catch me because they saw me and as an intruder on their sacred land and they wanted to sacrifice me to their god, the devil. I was petrified, but my blood boiled of fear. And I had no idea where I was even running. I could be running deeper in the woods or even far away from my own home. And there was no other homes in the vicinity other than my home and street. I didn't know what to do. I could have stayed and run off another path to find somewhere to hide, but the risk of doing that, I have no idea. And this was even way before even any of my family had cell phones. So it's unlike I just could find a place to hide and call my brother or my parents. So, what should I do? Well, I could either continue running and they get tired, and then they will easily capture me and sacrifice me or what their plans they had done or had in mind. Or I could just find somewhere to hide, maybe behind some big boulders or maybe a hole somewhere. As I was running around, hearing them falling behind me closer and closer, I was trying to figure out a plan to do. I mean, I only had two options. One, either keep running in this deep, dark woods, or try to find somewhere a shelter to hide, and hoping that this cultist would even find me. But even if so, I have also had no idea where I was even running. But I made a promise myself if I will even reach a place or even a home, well, I need to find somewhere. And luckily though, and as I was running, I noticed in the distance there were these big boulders, at least a group of stones. I couldn't even do anything, so and I took off running towards that direction. And luckily though, there was I did notice there was this hole behind some bushes in these boulders. So I tried to remove some of the bushes and hide beneath in there. Even there was tight space, but there was the only place I could even do. And I was hiding there, and only like a few minutes later, I can literally see these cult members running form past me, and without even imagined I was behind them the whole time. And they keep running and running and screaming, "We will find you! We will find you!" They screamed all the time. And I was petrified. I know that I could stay there and wait and keep running to another direction. And that was what I decided to do. After after I did that, I waited until I couldn't even hear them anymore, and I probably waited for another 15 minutes or so, and it went silent. I thought maybe they were far enough now, so I sneaked out my head, looked around without using my flashlight, and listened. No signs of them. No sign, no words, nothing. So I have only one option. I managed to sneak out of the cave that is behind the boulders and walk and rushed forward to a different direction where I came from. And I was hoping that I will find any other people. And I keep running for maybe another 10 minutes. And each time when I heard a sound behind me, I thought maybe it was these cult members. But it wasn't. I kept running and running, and soon I saw some light in distance. Streetlights. Homes. I was finally approaching, and I managed to run towards the place, and I was out on the street. I was actually on my own neighborhood. I was probably like three houses down from my own place. And I went home, and my parents hadn't even arrived home yet, or my brother. So I felt at least relief, but I closed the doors, both the back door and the front door, and put the blinds down so that no one actually would see it. I was hiding in my room, and I didn't even tell my parents at first when I came home. But what should I have even done? I could have told my parents, but they couldn't even bother. They only had two options: believe me or not. But since I had never been as much a liar in my whole life until that point, and even if I did tell my parents, they actually believed me. My brother, though, by the end, he didn't believe me. He believed that I was made it up after being watching something. And sure enough, my brother had a point. I had been watching many of those movies, so-called members. But even if I did tell my dad, can we just call the police about this? But unfortunately, there wasn't much they could have done. And even with the description that are based on the cult members that I saw from a distance, there was something that they had done legally. Only the shore that chased me from the woods, but that was probably not much it. And and even if so, even if the police would ask me where exactly I found these cult members, and I would even been able to give them exact location because this was way before GPS, and I would have been able to tell them exact. Well, somewhere deep in the woods, after this small clearing, another distant, the same direction, and you will find them. But even if the police will even get there in time, they probably will all be all gone. And so we never reported. But I did tell close friends all this, and they all believed me, and this just terrified them. Because people have been often saying there are some weird things happening in the woods, but never much as clarified to be what. And even so, I had nightmares of these cult members that they would find me in the middle of the night in my own house to drag me out of the house, sacrifice me to the devil, or what would I had planned. And in fact, I stayed away from the woods for months. And even almost 2 years later, I went back in the same location that I found this cult. It was like nothing existed there. It was like 2 years since, but ever since then, I had never seen those cult members ever again. I first believed maybe it was this. What if it was locals? But then they would have probably had all recognized me immediately. Since this was a small, close, knitted community, everyone knows everyone. But then, what if it was not locals? What if this were strange people from a different city or different state? But in the end, I don't know. But as I was getting older, I continued to tell this story to my friends and family, and even my own family, my own kids, my own husband know about this story. They were terrified, but I don't even live in my hometown anymore, which, surprising enough, though, I moved away there after I finished college. But I'm still to this day, I am very much scared and safe that I was not found by those cult members because who knows what they had in mind for me if they even caught me. But to this day, I am happy and that I never encountered that same cult members ever again. So if we were ever, even if we were ever pass to meet again, please don't let us ever meet again.